What is up, guys? Today we have a small but exciting handful of cards to do our initial review on. Again, I want to stress that these are incomplete initial thoughts as we don't have the full complete set yet. Before we get into the new cards, let's talk elementals, seeing as how we just got a lot of new information on them. Elementals are another minion subtype with a theme. Some of these cards gain bonus effects if you played an elemental type minion in the prior turn, meaning you'll want to plan and chain these together when you can to get the most value and the biggest payoffs. To go along with the new minion subtype, 18 older cards were changed to have that subtype as well. It's important to note that some of these cards gaining the subtype are just for flavor, as elemental cards are really only synergizing with priest, mage, and shaman. That being said, we may see targeted tech that destroys elementals or buffs them, for example, which then may affect cards like Ragnaros Late Lord and makes that potentially relevant. Notable cards that have been changed that could easily see more play because of this, depending on synergies, are Water Elemental, Unbound Elemental, Fireguard Destroyer, Earth Elemental, Fire Elemental, and Alakir. Frost Elemental gets an honorable mention as well, as he's seen fringe play in various decks like Reno Lock, and Rumbling Elemental could definitely see play as a lot of Shaman Elementals have battle cries. As a quick side note, the previously talked about Pyros gets a lot more potential value now that we know playing Elementals and doing it often is important to keep the synergies and value rolling. So let's get to the new stuff. This is Firefly, and he's insanely well designed in my opinion. He's a good one drop on both offense and defense with synergies. He gives you 2 elementals to play for those synergies that'll be shown in a bit and in future reviews, as well as just being a solid, well-rounded minion. You get a 2/4 worth of stats for 2 mana, which is solid, and in a deck like Zoo, can often leverage both the stats as well as getting a token to discard to various effects. Flame Geyser is another similarly veined card, in that it is a simple core card that is used to gain value off of your elementals. This card seems quite fair for its cost, and there's not too much to talk about. It's just a well-rounded removal spell that you'll utilize if you have elemental synergies. Otherwise, there are likely slightly better cards to fill that slot. This card, on the other hand, isn't so simple. This card caused quite a bit of a fit on Twitter, which is always fun to see. This card is obviously playable, and I don't think anyone would really argue against that. However, there are a few talking points. First, it's a 1-drop that you're likely playing alongside the quest Awaken the Makers, so you're never really playing it on 1 unless you're just playing it as a dirtly minion in a control or something. The card also pulls from your opponent's deck, unlike Swashbuckler-esque effect, which is both good and bad. Yes, your opponent's deck is going to contain, on average, higher value cards, but the surprise factor is limited as you're not going to pull a Doom or Pyroblast out of thin air, so there is some counterplay. This card will find so many homes though, as it has subtle synergies everywhere, with a good death rattle for Awaken the Makers, or potentially N'Zoth, the elemental tag for potential synergies, as well as again, just being a decent filler minion for other priest decks. Introducing Dr. Sentinel, or the 7 mana 4/4 meme. This card seems pretty gross at first, but if you take a minute to break it down, it may not be as strong as it initially appears. Don't get me wrong, this card is great, and I love its design and balance, but I don't think it is as insane as some people might suggest it is. The effect is essentially Feral Spirits plus a 4/4 minion for 7 mana, which seems fair, but to push it a little bit above the power curve, you avoid the overload, as well as its all-in-one card, which is always relevant, as it's still a lot of value, though it is conditional, which is relevant as you have to play an elemental, or you're then playing the worst meme card. Also, if you compare this card directly to Jade Chieftain, who often pushes out a 5/5, you're getting 3 slightly weaker bodies and less total stats, so he does seem fairly well balanced in that regard. If a curved mid-range elemental shaman deck is a thing, he'll definitely see play though. This is what you call a potentially big payoff for elemental decks. Even if you just play Firefly and Flame Elemental on the prior turn, you'll have yourself a 5/15, which is strong, and if your opponent doesn't have a hard removal, you'll likely win the game. However, if they have a hard removal or a silence, you get a little to no payoff. Because this is just a big, dumb minion and the meta appears to be going mid-range, meaning there will be a lot more hard removal and likely even Black Knights running around, I highly doubt he'll see play. But he's a fun flavor card, so there's that. This card, on the other hand, is beyond difficult to evaluate, as he simply does a ton of things all at once. Everyone on Twitter had drastically different opinions about him, which just shows how difficult he is to actually evaluate. He can be compared to all kinds of cards, but none of them fit perfectly, so it's really hard to place him. What I will say though, is that if the meta is mid-range, and Paladin gets a few tools, this card could potentially be absurd and one of my favorite cards from the set. If you have a board that's on equilibrium with your opponents, then you get to make some value trades and then cast Sunkeeper to heal up or reset your minions you use to get favorable trades with, and then the remaining all clean trade for each other. In addition, and another common type of play I expect to see, say you EQ conk a board, and then the next turn your opponent drops, say, an Ancient of War, you can follow up with just this, and you've set up a wall and neutered the threat. Aggro S decks can use this guy as kind of an alpha strike for your board, which is always relevant and provides burst, as well as a line of protection for your minion. All in all, this card does a lot of things, and well enough that he could easily be the cornerstone of a lot of value-trained Paladin decks. Shadow Visions is a card I'm truly excited for, and one that might finally get me to play enough Priests to finally get that class gold. This is the closest to Demonic Tutor that we've seen in Hearthstone. Both control and combo Priest style decks now or in the future can leverage this for quite a bit of value. Most Priest decks run a small handful of spells, and because you're discovering from that pool, you'll likely get something you're very happy with, if not exactly what you were looking for. This is also only copying the chosen card, so you're netting additional copies of whatever your best spells are. Basically, it's another utility belt card that allows it to function as multiple cards all at once at the cost of 2 mana, which is actually quite insane when you consider in Magic, the only tutor effect really printed nowadays costs 4 mana. The drawback here though is that in Hearthstone, it is often a very tempo-based game, so you may not have the time to cast this spell. That being said, you're playing Priest, let's be real, you were going to hero power on 2 anyways. Another truly absurd card in Clutch Mother's Abyss. Previously, discarding a card was actually a cost, now it's a bonus. She'll see play in a lot of decks, from the Portal Quest style decks to discard zoo variation, as even pitching her once is good enough and makes risky or costly cards like Soulfire or Doomguard become a lot more appealing and enable you to play them more loosely. In addition, she can cover multiple discard costs, which is a pretty big deal, especially when you're doing the quest, because you need to actually discard 6 cards, or in this case, just Zavis and a few times and a few random cards. I can't wait for the 2 mana 8/8 memes either. Alright, that's all for today, though that was some pretty exciting stuff, so Goro is really starting to take shape, and I'm quite excited for Hearthstone. Let's just pray they don't print another Yogg, Flamewaker, or Buccaneer. With that being said, if you have any additional questions or comments, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and take it easy.